Good morning, everyone. I'm excited for this event. I'm going to talk really slow while people join. I'm watching the participant count go up. This is exciting. Hey, this is our biggest event of the year. So this is exciting, Dr. Dotzour. We're kicking off 2021. We got 2020 in the rearview mirror. Good riddance. Go away. Bye-bye. Don't ever want to hear from you again. Forget my phone number kind of thing, right? So we've got people coming in today from Chicago, Minneapolis, Houston. Those are where our offices are, but we also have people all over the Midwest. So if you're joining us right now, you're also joining people from all over the country to watch this 1-hour presentation by Dr. Dotzour. Okay, then we're going to split up again and you're going to go to your respective markets, whichever one you want to watch. I'll put links for all three up. If you're like, hey, I'm watching in Houston, but you know what? I'd rather go to Chicago. I can take you to Chicago. I'll give you the link. And they've got a full day of events planned. Minnesota's got events planned, and Houston, Texas has events planned. So I'll get those up there, but this is exciting. Are you ready to rock and roll? I see the numbers are still climbing. I'll give you a quick intro. While we're kind of waiting for people to come on. My name is Todd Phillips. I am supposed to be the CFO of REjouranls, but COVID hit in March. I happened to be in Dr. Dotzour's land of Texas. And I thought, oh my goodness, we have lost everything. We're in the event business, people, right? We do publications, Red News in Texas, Minnesota Real Estate Journal, Illinois Real Estate Journal, Midwest Real Estate News. So we do have a steady business there, but most of the bulk of our revenues are our events. So we were a little nervous until we switched to online. So I'm going to announce at the end of this thing that we have hit, this is going to blow your mind, okay? We were expecting, Dr. Dotzour, 8,000 to 10,000 people to walk through our doors for our live events in 2020. So when we couldn't have events, we pivoted to online. We hit today during registration, our 50,000th viewer since COVID. So wow. It's been a game changer and fun for us, and thanks to you. And I got to tell you, let's see, we're almost getting to capacity here, so it should be good. That Dr. Dotzour was the one who kicked it off for us. So when we figured out how to learn to use Zoom, and all of us old people got to do a Zoom call and figure out how that we didn't have a microphone with our computer or a camera, and go out and buy a bunch of equipment on Amazon and keep them busy and rich. We put Dr. Dotzour on, and we had almost 7,000 people total have viewed that presentation now. So let's have the same thing today. All right, let's rock and roll. I promised I would do an intro. Dr. Dotzour is absolutely the #1 economist in the country for real estate people, because you can take something that's really heady and really impressive and dial it down and give it to us real estate folks in terms of things we can understand. Like you and I talked the other day about workforce housing. I understand workforce housing. I don't understand the global supply of capital. I'd like to, but I'm counting on you to tell us how we can do those sort of things. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm excited for this. I'll be here the whole time. I might jump in and ask some questions. I'll also run your PowerPoint for you.
Thanks, Todd. That'll be great. So you get the PowerPoint up, and I'll just say good morning to everybody across the country. It's a new year, and I'm optimistic. I'm a little nervous, but I'm very optimistic. Took me a while. This is going to be the first time I've done this presentation, because typically in January, I redo my entire theme of my program for the year. And I tell people that you don't really need to see me speak more than once or twice a year, because hopefully things don't change that much. And so this is going to be fun to work through with you today. It took me a while to come up with the metaphor I wanted, because I like to have a picture to start my slideshow off every year. That's how you can tell if I'm wrong, because if you see me in January with these two boats, and then you see me in May with something different, you'll know that either I was wrong or something dramatically changed in the interim period. But this is just perfect. As I see that boat on the left there, that was in March. And when I see this boat on the right, I see what's coming down the road in this summer and into this fall. And I'm just anxious for it to happen. And of course, keep in mind, I'm an economist. Todd knows this too, that being an economist means there's a 50% chance everything I say is wrong, but they could have paid $500,000 for Ben Bernanke to give a speech, and his odds wouldn't be any better than mine. So let's get started. Todd, next slide, please. So there's kind of a whiplash event going on. That boat was going straight down, and then it's going straight up. And this is the opposite of calm waters. where it's pretty easy to forecast everything, anticipate things. Because right now what we're doing is we're trying to get past this COVID hangover. And so I'm just looking at these people in here, and that lady up on the top left, what would she like to be doing? You can see she's probably on some kind of team meeting, working from home. And the lady up on the top right, what would those kids like to be doing? What would she like to be doing? And the same with the man down in the bottom left and the students. Everybody's kind of ready to do something different than what they've been doing. And that's why I've been bullish for the last 6 months. It's just I'm waiting for the go signal, I call it. Next slide, please. What's been dramatic, there's a lot of things going on right now that don't normally happen. And so this savings rate is crazy. I remember back in 2013 or so, you see where that savings rate went up? That was a time when people got some money from the government and they put it in the savings account. And look what's happened this time around. Americans just aren't spending money, and they're saving it. And what that's going to do is create a lot of pent up demand, because I've been doing this kind of thing now since 1997. And one thing I've learned is permanent, year in and year out, cyclical up, cyclical down. Americans do not tolerate deferred gratification. And they have been deferring gratification for almost a year now. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of money on the sidelines. In addition to that, people are just getting tired of the virus, and that's manifesting itself in many ways. It's bullish in my mind, but it's also dangerous. France reversing their bookstore closures amid lockdown anger. People are just tired of being told what to do. Businesses are having a hard time having mayors and governors and health people saying you're not an essential business. Well, you know what? If your livelihood, if you're a small business with 3 generations working there and you're putting your kids through high school and college, that's an essential business to you, whether a mayor or a governor says that or not. And so the frustration and the anger there is healthy for our economy, because we love freedom in this country. And so, well, let me just move on. I think I've made my point there. Next slide. So when I think about when's it going to happen? I mean, this is the key, is when is this going to end? And I'm 66 years old. I've got a long history of asthma, bronchitis, and pneumonia. And so I'm taking this very seriously. In fact, a friend of ours is on a ventilator in a induced coma right now. He's a 45-year-old man with a beautiful wife and 2 children. And he got that just about 2 weeks ago. And we're waiting every hour for news from Mike if he's going to survive or not. And so I'm taking it very seriously. And a lot of people around the country are. And so when will I get out? I thought maybe I'm pretty conservative. A lot of you will get out before me, I'm sure, want to. But when would I get out? And I've decided it's going to be when I get the vaccine. Just came to that conclusion just a couple of weeks ago, actually. And so I'm calling that the get out of jail card for me personally. And so I started doing the research on it because I needed to know. And so what I found out is you get this partial protection from the vaccine as early as 12 days after the first dose, but 2 doses are required. And one of those vaccines, you get a second shot, 21 days, or with the other Moderna, it's 28 days. So that for me is going to be kind of my go signal. And so as more and more people around the country and around the world get confident that they're protected from COVID, we just got to pray and keep our fingers crossed that these vaccines actually work like they're thinking they're going to. And I feel good about that too. So anyhow, that's why I'm pretty bullish about later on this summer, because as more and more people get vaccinated, people like me will show up at an antique store and buy some books, and show up at a coffee shop owned by a small business and buy some coffee from them and tip them pretty highly, and congratulate them on making it through the storm. Next slide, please. This is what I feel like is going to happen. In the very first opening slide with the boat going straight down in March of 2020, this is what I feel like looks like. This is called pent-up demand. And man, when that horn sounds, that go signal sounds, this is the kind of enthusiasm that I feel like is being created under the surface here. And this is why I think we could see, remember back in March when the boat was going straight down? Well, it was hard to find toilet paper, and it was hard to find vegetables, and hard to find several different things that were kind of surprising to us. That's what happens when you have surprising demand for that sort of stuff. Well, pent up demand for everything else, we're going to have that same, I think we could have that same kind of situation. Instead of a shortage of toilet paper and Clorox wipes and hand sanitizer, there might be a shortage of hotel space in Orlando, Florida, or other beautiful places that people want to go visit, or a shortage of opportunities to go to a national park because everybody on earth is going to be outdoors again. And so it's going to be a wonderful feeling, but it's also going to be a crowded environment, I think, with all that savings that's gone on, with all that deferred gratification that's piling up. I'm not underestimating the power of this pent-up demand. Next slide, please. These are just a partial list. And this, I'm 66, so your pent-up demand could be a lot different than mine. I totally get that. But new clothes. I mean, nobody's been buying clothes because you don't need to go anywhere, but people are going to want to go places. They're going to want to buy new clothes. They're going to want to take vacations and go to the movies, attend a convention again, and do some business travel, have a real wedding with lots of people and lots of catering and lots of fun, and a DJ that's been out of work for a long time, and restaurants, and people have been postponing selling a house, and going back to school and college. I'm excited. That makes me feel, like I said, this is the first time I've made this presentation. It makes me feel good just to think about what this is going to do as soon as we get enough people vaccinated that we get past the corona pandemic. Next slide, please. One of the things that is choppy out there is the supply chain. I first noticed, I've been following supply chain because I'm a big fan of industrial real estate and distribution, and I think it's fascinating anyhow. But the supply chain really kind of broke down in March because half of the toilet paper in the country went to restaurants and the other half went to homes. And none of our homes had the hardware available to have a 3-foot diameter wheel of toilet paper there. And so that's why we had a shortage for a while. And the supply chain has been struggling ever since then, and it's still struggling right now. In fact, the COVID vaccine situation is in tight supply because they're having a hard time hiring enough people, like that nice young man down in the bottom left there. There's thousands of jobs that are open right now and needed to distribute the vaccine. And guess what? That guy that's distributing the vaccine is also the guy that's distributing, bringing your new laptop computer to your house. And so this is a problem. This is a real problem around the world with a lot of kinks in the supply chain. Next slide, please. And it's showing up in shipping, first of all. Number one, that picture down the bottom left, I have a friend that was a captain in the merchant marine. And so he drove boats like this all over the earth for quite a long time. This is what a container ship looks like when they got out in choppy water, and half of the containers are now on the bottom of the ocean. And so when I was waiting for a telescope for my son for a Christmas present, and it got delayed and delayed and delayed, I thought, I hope it's not in the bottom of the Pacific Ocean there because of what happened here. But look at the chart here, shipping costs. This is the average cost to ship a container from Shanghai. And that index has gone from like 1,000 to 2,750. So shipping costs are virtually tripling right now. And so, and the supply is limited. We don't have enough boxes, the container boxes themselves, because all the stuff comes over from China and nothing goes back to China. That's why we need China to buy stuff from us. That's called a trade partner. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is going to be an interesting year because since 1997, I've been telling my clients every year, we're not going to have runaway inflation. Some of my clients are my age or older, and they've just been waiting for that runaway inflation that they saw. And I've been trying to help them say we don't live in that world anymore, but we actually could have inflation for a year with this pent-up demand. I mean, think about what happened to toilet paper and Clorox products when they came into short supply. When people start to travel again, the price of oil is going to go up and the price of gasoline is going to go up, and hotel rates. You're not going to find a hotel at a nice place that used to be $240 a night for $62. It's going to be $242 or maybe $250. And so all of these things that I see here, including higher college tuition and housing, all of and the cheaper US dollar, all of these things lead to price increases in a lot of things that are significant. So here's what I kind of want you to be careful with. If you're a real estate investor, you could be thinking this is finally the time when we're going to have inflation and cap rates are going to go up. I just don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. Keep in mind, I'm an economist, 50% chance everything I say is wrong. Next slide, please. Okay. Higher inflation could cause mortgage rates to go up a little bit. And so there's always this fear out there that when your government's running a big debt and huge deficits, that inflation's right around the corner. It's natural for people to feel that way. But what you've got to keep in mind is the Federal Reserve controls the interest rates really on mortgages now, as well as the Fed funds rate. And so the Federal Reserve is not going to allow mortgage rates to go up very much because the housing market is one of the strong spots in the economy and going to lead us out of this recession we've been in. And the last thing they want to do is let mortgage rates get high and all of a sudden the housing market slows down again. They won't let that happen. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. Feel like Dean Martin or Blake Shelton, have to have a drink right in the middle of the voice just to add the pastiche to my drinking water while I'm talking. I think we're going to have this complaint again of a jobless recovery. It doesn't mean we don't get new jobs. It just means it's too darn slow. And as I look back over this century, this is the growth rate in jobs every year. Runs about 2.5 at the peak. It used to be 5. 40 years ago, we'd get 5% job growth at a peak. Now we're lucky if we get 2.5. And it doesn't matter who's president. You can see here under Bush, Obama, Trump, didn't matter, Republican or Democrat, we get less than 2.5% job growth. That's a mature economy in a very competitive global environment. That's what happens. Next slide, please. And it doesn't matter about tax policy either. Those yellow boxes I put up there, were tax cuts that were initiated in various stages over this century. And what I see from this, I see 2, 5, 6 boxes along the top there with a T in them. And I don't see hardly any impact on job growth among those. And so my conclusion is tax cuts aren't the answer. We need something else if we want to have higher job growth going forward. Next slide, please. This is just a global thing. There's nothing wrong with America. This is the percentage change in job growth, but it goes back to 1960. And I just wanted to illustrate for you, I wasn't making that up when I said that the growth rate has been declining. And what's happened is we have a lot of competition. Back in 1980, that's when we first started buying stuff from Japan and outsourcing all the stereos and all the TVs. And then we started outsourcing a lot of clothes and a lot of cars to Mexico. And then we started outsourcing all kinds of information technology jobs to India. And then we started outsourcing a whole bunch of everything else to China. So we have purposefully exported our jobs around the world. And now these are tough competitors. China, India, Europe, these are tough competitors. And they have lots of people that want to work and lots of people that would like to make money. And so the world that the United States is competing in 2020 and 2021 is way different than it was in 1980. So I expect to see continued slow job growth, and that's why we'll have continued slow inflation and low interest rates. Next slide, please. Then the question I had was, how long does it take to get your jobs back in jobless recoveries? And so I looked at on the left side over there, we had a recession in around 2001, 2002 timeframe. And it took 47 months for us to just get back to where we were before that recession happened. And we were calling that a jobless recovery. And that was under a Republican president. And then we had another recession, and it took 77 months to get that back. We had a Democrat president that time. I'm not Republican or Democrat. I can't stand either party. They're not parties anymore. They're tribes, and their tribal warfare is just disgusting to me. So it doesn't matter. Tax cuts don't matter. Republican or Democrat don't matter. What matters is we have exported a lot of our jobs to other parts of the world, and they're happy about it. And there's a lot of people in this country that aren't very happy about it. Next slide, please. This slide makes me feel good. It's a little dated now. It's back in November, but it just makes me feel too good. I like it. Job openings are rising all over the place. Businesses are being formed. Let's see, who is this? ZipRecruiter, okay? There were 10.8 million job openings posted online so far in November. We're getting back to work. It's going to happen. It just won't happen as fast as we would like, probably. Next slide, please. Part of the reason the job growth will be slow is because state and local government are major employers. Your city, your county, your state, they hire a lot of people. And I don't need to read all of this to you. I hope you'll just kind of use it as a reference, if nothing else. But the budget shortfall is massive. And there's a reason why they were talking about including state and local governments in the next CARES package to go out, because what's happening is revenue at state and local level has dropped enough that they're going to have to lay off people. They already have that over in the bottom right there. Local government workforces cut 6% of their people because of the budget pressure. So there is some reason to want to support governments at the state and local levels, including your counties, to try to keep people employed. May or may not happen. I don't know. Next slide, please. I did quite a bit of homework. I am apolitical. I like public servants in office that are voted and elected to do what needs to be done to make our country prosperous and a fun and pleasant place to live. That's my political bias. And when Republicans can do that, I like them. And when Democrats can do that, I like them. But unfortunately, they've been failing so miserably for a long time. It's very disappointing to me. But I'm getting used to that now. So anyhow, so many people ask me what happens if we get a change in government, and I forced myself to watch both the conventions and 2 of the debates, and then I read this 110-page Biden-Sanders unity platform because I wanted to know in detail what was of interest to people should the Democrats take control. And so as a business person, I'm not analyzing this as a politician. I could care less what your politics are. And you don't need to be worried about what mine are. Here's my politics. I love America because we have freedom to think differently and celebrate our differences of opinions. And that's what makes America so strong and so attractive to investors from all over the earth, because we have the rule of law here. And just because a Republican in office doesn't mean they might take your real estate, or just because a Democrat's in office, they might take your real estate. We don't do that in America. We have the rule of law, and that's why money will continue to flow into this country in massive amounts over the next 5 years, just like it has in the last 20. Make no mistake about it, climate change is going to be a big deal. It was the first 2 words in the document. And they talk about in there on the first page how climate change is going to have an impact on all of their decisions. So this is a real deal this time. Next slide, please. From a commercial real estate standpoint, after reading the whole 110 pages, and I have a personality flaw, I can't dance or carry a beat, and I can't carry a tune either, but I love making spreadsheets, and I love reading 110-page documents with a lot of footnotes in them. I read every line of that 110 pages with a notebook right beside me to see what it had in store for commercial real estate, residential real estate, urban versus suburban, those sorts of things. And there was very little about commercial real estate in particular, other than we're going to try to set up a situation where all buildings 10 years from now will be net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So there'll be some changes in design that way. And they want to incentivize people to retrofit 4 million buildings. So there'll be some opportunities for people to do that too. Encourage states and cities to adopt energy efficient building codes. That sounds nice, but what's going to do, it's going to raise the cost of construction. So not only will commercial buildings get more expensive, but houses will too, and apartments will too, because every time you put a new building code on, the cost of construction goes up. That's just the way it goes. So it makes it kind of hard to have affordable housing when you have more and more stringent building codes. But that's how we operate in this country and have for a long time. No mention of the 1031 exchange in the document. Next slide, please. Under the taxes situation, it looks like we're going to try to get rid of capital gains tax. What will that do? Well, what that will do is make investing in stocks less attractive. And what happens every time investing in stocks gets less attractive? There is no attraction in the bond market. And so there's 2 games in town, really, stocks and real estate. And every time the stock market has a 40% hiccup, demand for real estate investment goes up. And when you get rid of capital gains, that won't be the end of the world. But what will happen is it will make investing in stocks less attractive vis-a-vis real estate, which will increase demand even further. Bringing into expensive tax loopholes. These are all quotes. These are not paraphrases. That one kind of caught my attention because they didn't spell out what those expensive tax loopholes are. But it made me wonder if the 1031 isn't underneath that description. corporate tax rates go up a little bit, estate taxes will go up a little bit, and provide more tax breaks for home ownership. I don't know what that means exactly. There was one thing in there that bothered me a lot. Out of the whole thing, the only thing that bothered me the most was amending the Federal Reserve Act. I have a lot of clients that are bankers, and I joke with them occasionally because they're all nervous about bank regulation. They didn't like Dodd-Frank too much, and they're afraid that you might have a new kind of Dodd-Frank coming down the road here again. And I teased him. I said, well, you know, the Fed has a dual mandate to keep inflation in check and to promote full-time job growth. And I said, you know what, though? That dual mandate is created by Congress, and Congress could change it totally overnight if they want. How about a triple mandate or a quadruple mandate, where if you have to bail out a big bank again next time for about $500 billion, then you have to match that, kind of matching funds. Every dollar you spend to bail out a big bank is money that has to be given away for affordable housing. So what it would do is double the cost of fixing a bank problem. And the bankers then, I was joking about that, they said, don't even talk about that. That's not even funny. And then I got to about page 95 of that Biden-Sanders platform, and there it is. The Federal Reserve Act should be amended. And I thought, wow, this would be, if that got amended, the problem with amending things is that once you open up anything for amendment, then 22 different people with 22 different ideas can offer amendments as well. This would be very threatening to the bond market. If we start to amend the Federal Reserve Act, what that will mean is that the likelihood of inflation goes up. And with that said, that will cause interest rates to go up, and I'll have to change my analysis. My analysis is based on the fact that we will not amend the Federal Reserve Act. I hope that happens. Next slide, please. It's not only Democrats that are talking about this. Here's a Republican. A GOP senator's push to stifle Fed lending. So there you go. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's just folks in power. And when folks in the Democrat tribe talk about amending the Fed, and folks in the Republican tribe talk about amending the Fed, they don't know what they're getting into when they do that. Because when the bond market around the world loses confidence in the integrity of the Federal Reserve, people will start pulling money out of America, and that's when you get inflation, when people decide, I'm getting my money out of the United States and I'm moving it to Europe, even with negative bond rates. So they're playing with big fire here. And so I'm certain that they're not silly enough to do that to the American people. Next slide, please. Also, I'm 66 years old. First election I voted in was when Nixon was running for office. And I've learned over the years that politicians tend to pay attention to their donors. Republicans do this, Democrats do this. And so it made sense to me. It's like, okay, I saw what the Biden-Sanders platform says, but I'd like to also know who the major donors are. And so as I'm looking at this lineup, I'm seeing that securities investment, Wall Street was a big contributor for President Biden. And I like saying that. We have a president. We have a electoral college. We have the rule of law. And I'm sure there's been all kinds of mischief in elections in my lifetime. This isn't the first time there's been mischief in elections. And so anyhow, with that said, I'm seeing Wall Street I'm not too concerned about major bank reform, and I'm not too concerned about amending the Federal Reserve because Wall Street is the biggest contributor. So I feel comfortable that there won't be anything major done to disrupt the financial system of our country, which is important to me. Same thing with high tech and lawyers. And so in my mind, it's just another indicator of how politicians are likely to perform. It's very hard to predict. And I don't know anything about politics, but I do know they can matter in investment decisions. And that's all I'm interested in. Next slide, please, Todd. Thank you. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. Usually by this point in my presentation, half my audience is asleep and you're still knocking it dead. So it's fun to work with you this morning. So let's talk about translating some of this down to commercial real estate. Next slide, please. Number one, money is just going to flood in again. This story keeps happening every year. And I keep thinking it's going to stop at some point. And trust me, I don't have any pride of ownership in my ideas or my analysis. I'm totally data driven, just like the Fed. We're data driven. And if the data changes and it's not consistent with what I'm thinking, I'm going to change what I'm thinking, because I really take my responsibility seriously. That if you're taking an hour to listen to me talk, you know I don't know everything. You know there's a 50% chance everything I say is wrong, but you also know that I'm doing my best to try to understand things and make sense out of it. And I want to be right. And so the money is flowing in. Here's just one example. Blackstone raised an $8 billion Fred debt fund. This is typical at this stage of a real estate cycle, because a lot of people at this point don't want to own the equity in buildings. They want to own the debt, because if somebody can't make the debt, then they get the property by being the owner. It's called loan to own, money pouring in. Next slide. There's even more money piling in, private equity. I have a lot of private equity clients, and some of them up in Minnesota, actually, and other places around the country. But there's 204 billion in dry powder sitting out there. Dry powder means that some 30-year-old sales rep for a private equity firm went out on the road all over America, made road shows to high net worth investors and said, we're going to buy a bunch of real estate and you invest with us, you're going to make a lot of money. That takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of ego. And they've raised, dry powder means they've raised that money and haven't deployed it yet. I call that distressed buyers. We all know what distressed sellers are in real estate. These are in effect distressed buyers, because they've raised the money and they need to put it somewhere. Next slide, please. Another source of demand comes from institutional investors. Those are your pension funds and insurance companies. And these are from all over the world, and they continue to raise their allocation of real estate. 30, 40 years ago, it was fairly simple, 50% stocks, 50% bonds. That's how you manage your pension. Well, over the years now, there's no yield in bonds, so something has to change, and what is changing is the allocation to real estate. And so each year you can see this grows a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So with money coming in from private equity, money coming in from SPACs. If you don't know what those are, I can't even tell you. SPA, special purpose acquisition companies, maybe that's it. SPACs are just a public way of raising money, and it's just a person. I could do that tomorrow. Mark Dotzour SPAC, and I could go public on the New York Stock Exchange. And you say, what are you going to do, Marky boy? And I'll say, I don't know yet, but when I raise this money, I'm going to do something good, and it's going to be good, and you're going to really like it. Well, these SPACs are being formed by the handfuls every week. So there's way too, if you thought there was too much money chasing deals in the 90s or in the early 2000s or in the last 5 years, there's more money coming right down the road. Next slide, please. So prices are likely to stay very firm, and cap rates are likely to stay very low. Now, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about urban versus suburban. I love what's happened to American cities over the last 40 years. I remember being a young guy back in the 80s and going to a convention in New York and being scared to death. I wasn't used to it. I came out of Wichita, Kansas. Wasn't used to it, got there, but New York City was a scary place back then. And so is Chicago. And so are other urban areas. And due to good policing methods, the urban cities were a renaissance, and they became fun. And they are fun, and they can continue to be fun, but you cannot have the urban vibe without public safety. I'll be the first to say right now that if a policeman murders somebody, they should go to jail, period. I don't care what their union says about it or anything else, they should go to jail. And I totally understand peaceful protests. That's the freedom we enjoy in America. It's part of the fabric of our country. But breaking into a business and stealing everything in there, that is not peaceful protest. That's criminal behavior, that's anarchy, and that's chaos. And some of these mayors have mistakenly, for whatever reason, allowed it to happen. And I think we're going to learn from that. You have to learn, if you're under 40 years old, you have no idea that New York City used to be a really scary place, or LA, or Philly, or these other places. All you know, if you're 40 years old, all you know is that, dude, this is fun being in Seattle or places like that, because it's great. I love the vibe. Well, that vibe is all predicated on private property rights and public safety. When you take that away, businesses leave. And I like to get, I'm not picking on San Francisco here. It's just when I see something in the media that supports a hypothesis I have, I like to offer it as evidence. It's not picking on San Francisco, but this is what happens when you get too much shoplifting or worse, businesses can leave, and that urban vibe can leave quickly. Next slide, please. And the sad part is that when the urban vibe leaves, it takes years to get it back. Just another comment here. This was just a mistake. That mayor in Seattle, I'm sure, was trying their best. But it's a grand social experiment. It seems like, I don't even know what the term means, but it seems like the word progressive mayor indicates a mayor that's interested in alternative public safety. And alternative public safety, in theory, sounds like a neat idea, but in practice, it's not working yet. And so we're going to get it. I feel like we're going to get it. It's a grand social experiment with public safety right now. And hopefully in a short period of time, we'll know what's a good way to go to protect citizens of all colors and all races, because everybody that lives in America, even whether you're a citizen or not, you should feel perfectly comfortable walking in any city in the United States of America. And our mayors and our governors and our presidents and our senators and our congressmen better figure this out, because people can leave these big cities overnight. The workers there, when the urban vibe's gone, they can move to Austin or some other place where it's fun to be again. And so this will happen. I'm confident in the American people that they will learn from mistakes and will figure out some way to preserve private property rights for businesses and families that live in major urban areas, and allow people to have freedom of expression without destroying businesses and family neighborhoods. Next slide, please. That's called anarchy, actually. And so part of the good news to me is that a federal judge is allowing businesses to sue Seattle over this. And I hope this happens all over the country, because when you're paying taxes, you're a small business and your family livelihood depends on it. And suddenly your mayor just arbitrarily decides not to offer public safety, and your business gets destroyed and all of your neighbors are afraid to walk down the street. You should sue. You're paying taxes to have a quality of life here. And whether you're a progressive mayor or a not progressive mayor, whatever those terms mean, you know, when you go to mayor school, that people need to feel happy and safe to reelect you as mayor. So I'm expecting they'll learn that lesson pretty quickly. Next slide, please. Secondary markets are attracting attention. This actually has nothing to do with the urban vibe, and it has everything to do with that the primary markets have been overcooked with investors for the last 10 years at least. What are primary markets are New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago to a certain extent. I'll put Houston in there too. Those are primary markets, and those are the big cities. And when you live in Bahrain, or you live in Israel, or you live in Venezuela or China, you may not have heard of Lubbock, Texas, or Tulsa, Oklahoma. So you invest in cities that you know. And so there's been enormous focus on primary markets for so long that the yields got really low. And so a lot of investors moved out into secondary markets. That would be a place like Kansas City or St. Louis, Minneapolis, Austin, Texas. And so I'm still super bullish on this because the yields are higher in secondary and tertiary markets. If you live in a tertiary market, and I'm not even going to mention any of those by name because nobody likes being labeled a tertiary market, but you know it if you live there. There's some great yields in towns that you live in, but people need your expert advice to find them, to know what they are, because there's less room for error. When you buy an office building or a retail building or an apartment in a tertiary market, it's easier to make mistakes and the liquidity is lower, but the opportunity is excellent. Next slide, please. The housing market is on fire, and the Fed engineered this. I said at meetings all over the country in 2019 and 2020 that the next time we have a recession, mortgage rates will go down to 2 or 2.5%. Well, they didn't go all the way to 2.5 because the Fed didn't need that. They dropped it down to 2.9, and that created a boom in refinancing, and it created a boom in the single family housing market. And so it's very possible that we're at the low ebb of the mortgage rate cycle right now because the Fed doesn't need to make it go lower. Next slide, please. And so not only that, but there's demand for investor housing. People are buying single family homes and keeping them for rent and not putting them in the housing market. So the shortage of available houses, the inventory shortages that are prevalent all over this country are going to continue unabated. And without very much supply of single family, that's going to drive prices higher and higher. Next slide, please. I've already talked about this. I'm going to move on. Let's go to the next slide, Todd. The biggest unknown for me is what's going to happen with the forbearance plan. There are millions of people, 5 million or so, that are delinquent on their loans and haven't been making payments. And so how will this unpaid rent be treated? How will delinquent commercial real estate loans be treated? How will leases be modified or restructured? And will residential mortgages be modified or restructured? I did a lot of reading on that yesterday after I sent the PowerPoint in to Todd. And the answer to these questions is on the residential side, yes, many of these loans are going to be restructured. So if you're worried about some kind of impending foreclosure wave that's going to sink the single family housing market, I don't think you need to be worried about that because the federal government, who runs Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the Federal Reserve do not want to have a housing price collapse like we saw in 2008. And it looks like they're setting the table up to be sure that doesn't happen. Next slide, please. I don't know how much longer government entities, health agencies are going to be able to tell you can't evict tenants. This is a violation of the rule of law, and it feels like a public taking without compensation to me. I hope this ends pretty soon because how many government agencies are going to have the ability to take away your private property rights as a property owner and void your lease contracts? It's just unheard of. I've never seen it before. I hope it goes away pretty soon. A lot of silly things I hope will go away pretty soon, because silly things are silly in a short term, and then they become a huge concern. every month and every year that the silliness doesn't get resolved. Next slide, please. I want to finish here talking about inflation, because I know a lot of you are worried about it, because we're running $3 trillion budget deficits. The federal debt is going to be $30 trillion probably by the end of this year. And you think that can create inflation. And you'd be right in a certain kind of way. If you were an economics major and read all the textbooks, your logic would be right. But there's other things going on that make economic textbooks somewhat misleading or irrelevant. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide, please. There's only two ways you can get inflation, and one is like what happened in the late 60s and early 70s, when you have excess demand and a shortage of something. And what we had was excess demand for oil and a shortage of oil and gasoline. And we also had a shortage of labor because the country was heavily unionized in labor. And there were a lot of labor strikes, which create labor shortages, which create higher wages. But in 2021, you can't have this kind of inflation unless you print money continuously and make people spend it. That's a key. A $1,200 check is not going to create inflation unless there's another one every month. And then if you really want to create inflation, you have to tell people, we're going to give you $1,200 a month, but you can't save it. It's in a gift card, and that gift card expires at the end of this month, and you'll get another one. That's what it would take to have inflation of this type. We'd also have to shut off all imports or put heavy tariffs on, because China can supply everything we want to buy. And there's no shortage of how many refrigerators or bicycles they can make when they get up to full speed. We'd have to shut off globalization and offshoring and tell businesses, you can't, all of those businesses, all those employees you've got in India and China, you can't have them anymore, or we're going to tax you to smithereens. Or on the other side of that, you could have a communist revolution again in China, where they do this occasionally, where the pure communists there say, we don't like this capitalism that we're doing. We're going to turn our backs on the West again, and we're going to close our doors. That would be inflationary, because suddenly there would be a shortage of everything for quite a while. But I don't see that happening either. So next slide, please. The other way you have this is kind of unfolding a little bit. It's making me nervous. I call it what happens when the medicine stops working. And the medicine is the Fed keeps interest rates low. The Fed tells you they're going to keep interest rates low. The Fed tells you they're going to buy bonds, keep mortgage rates low. The government comes in and says, we're going to print money and give it to you for free. Well, the medicine works when they make those kind of noises and the stock market goes up 1,000 points or so, or 2,000. But here's when the medicine stops working, is when the government announces a new round of lower interest rates or more stimulus and huge deficit spending, and the stock market falls and the value of the dollar falls, and people no longer want to own dollars. Gold and Bitcoin skyrockets, and then people withdraw their money to buy hard assets. That would be real estate. That's why people want to own real estate. Money flows out of America to other countries, and the price of everything we buy skyrockets. And up until about 5 months ago, for the last 25 years, I've said, we're not even close to this. Just relax. It's not going to happen. But you know what now? The value of the dollar is falling. Part of that reason is because people don't want to own dollars. Gold and Bitcoin is skyrocketing. People are buying hard assets like Bitcoin and gold and real estate. But what's happened so far is money is not flowing out of America to other countries because there's no other place to go. We got our problems here, but we're the prettiest pig in the trough. So I don't see this path of inflation happening either until somebody can come up and become attractive to Americans and global investors who say, yes, I'm pulling out of America, I'm moving somewhere else. I don't see that on the horizon anytime soon. So with that said, that's why I think inflation's going to stay low, except maybe for a year here we have this whipsaw effect with the go signal and all the pent up demand. I could see having a higher rate of inflation for a year, but then in 2022, prices level off and inflation goes back towards zero. So that's why I feel like interest rates will stay low, cap rates will stay low. That's why I'm bullish on commercial real estate. And that's the end of my prepared remarks. And Todd, if you would like, I'd enjoy visiting with you if you have some questions.
I have more questions than we could possibly answer, but I'm going to go with the good ones from the chat room here.
I'll try to be fast too.
Yeah, we only have like 5 minutes and then we got to get to the next event. But new strain of virus, complete disaster if it's outside the range of what the vaccine can cover.
Yeah.
All bets are off.
All bets are off. What we do then, the government prints 3 trillion every 3 months. And we keep our fingers crossed that we don't totally blow up our currency and have that runaway inflation.
Effect on the stock market of changes in our relationship with China.
That's too tough to call.
That's what I thought too. That's a tough one. Depends on what those changes are.
It would hurt somebody like Starbucks, as somebody that's local here, it would help them. So it's a mixed bag.
I am a big proponent, and I've been saying for a few months now, I think we're headed into the most entrepreneurial decade in our history, because the business failures have unleashed creativity from these owners in terms of restaurants and startups. And it just feels like there's going to be this vibe of people wanting to get out and do stuff, whether that's 21 or 22, whenever it is. I feel a big decade of decadence coming on. Do you sense maybe the same thing?
Not only do I sense it, but the data is there too. I had a slide that I didn't put in this time. I put that one in about 10,000 jobs open. There's another one that I didn't put in this time about how many new companies are being formed. I'm getting goosebumps over just thinking about it, because I am so tired of the bad stuff that's happening in our country, and I'm so excited for our future. I just get goosebumps saying about it because it's there. It's not a sense of it. It is there. It's pent up demand to start a business too.
Well, I've been calling myself Nostradamus, so I got that one right.
Nice.
Right. Everybody just groaned and turned off their computer right now. Last one I want to touch on, though. Really good question here, and it's job skills. So we've been doing a lot of these events, and every kind of group I talk to them about jobs. Because I agree with you. I think we're in a jobless recovery. It's not going to be horrible, but it's going to be horrible for the people who don't have a job. But then you hear from employers, I've been trying to hire for months and I can't find the person. Then you talk about onshoring, right? Okay, let's bring some companies back or some manufacturing back from China. Let's put it into South Texas or Mexico. And do we have the job skills for that? So how do we solve this job skills problem? And is that a drag on the economy?
Well, it's easy to say, well, people just need to be retrained. But when you're 40 years old or 50 years old or even 38 years old with 3 kids at home, retraining isn't all that easy to do. So yeah, that's a problem. I think we want to continually invest in ourselves. It's called human capital. I invested 5 hours in my own human capital yesterday, just reading up on Fannie Mae forbearance and how they're going to handle mortgages. I enhanced my human capital with 5 hours of homework. And I want to encourage everybody, if you want to enhance your human capital, if you just spend 1 hour a day reading about something that's relevant to your job now, or something that's relevant to a job that you would like to have, if you just did 1 hour a day for a year, you would be 80% of the way to being a global expert on that topic.
I listen to, and I'm giving away one of my secrets here. I listen to Joe Rogan podcasts, but he had a neuroscientist on that said when you're our age, like you and I, Dr. Dotzour, our brains are very firm and hard, and it's hard to teach an old dog a new trick. But anytime there's a stressor event, so if you want to learn a new language, you got to be thrown into the environment where you're stressed by having to learn the new language. Or if you're sitting back at home and you want to learn French, pretty darn hard at 50 years old to learn French. But I wonder, I'm hopeful that COVID was enough of a stressor to make people's brains malleable again. Go get that new skill. Hey, we are out of time. This was awesome. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. This is going to be on YouTube. So for those of you who are saying, I'd love a copy of the slides, you can go back and watch the whole thing, rewind, re-listen, take notes. I took notes, but I'm going to watch it again. I'll get it up on my YouTube channel. Please, when you go there, though, subscribe and like the video, because another thing I learned about people over 50, Dr. Dotzour, they don't know how to use YouTube and hit subscribe. So I have like 2 subscribers and I need like 10,000 or something to play with the big guys. So don't forget to do that. Okay. I put links in the chat room for the lobbies. When you logged into this event, you came from a lobby. I'm going to try to screen share here real quick. This is the Chicago one. So when you came here, you pushed a button to watch Dr. Dotzour. I need you now to go to the next session and push a new button. Don't do that till I close this one out because I won't be there. Nobody else will be there. But as soon as we close out, back to this lobby here, click watch event, and you'll be able to get to the next panel. So there's one for Texas. There's one for Minnesota. There's one for Chicago. It's where you came from. If you want to switch, it's just fine. It's all free. You can go back to this chat room. Now it's probably lost in the numbers, but there are links in there. So thank you, everybody. Off we go to more forecasts.